For 24 years, the European explorer Marco Polo traveled through these routes, and despite him describing it in depth through his famous work, he never got credit for naming them. The name, Silk Road, was given by the German photographer and traveler Ferdinand von Richthofen in 1877 CE. It was the link between different regions of the ancient world in commerce. Popularly called the Silk Road, it wasn't just a single route from east to west, so many historians prefer to call it the Silk Route. For over 1,800 years, the Silk Road was used as a network of trader routes serving as the ultimate east-west connector. This was a time before airplanes and even reliable ships, when camels were still used for crossing wide deserts and treasure-filled mountains. Although it's been nearly 600 years since the Silk Road was used for international trade, you'll be surprised to know how much impact this ancient Silk Road had on the world. Watch till the end to find out. The Silk Road was used regularly from 130 BCE, when the Han Dynasty officially opened trade with the West, to 1453 CE, when the Ottoman Empire boycotted trade with the West and closed the routes. However, trade routes existed long before the Silk Road. The Royal Road of the Achaemenid Empire, for example, connected the mighty Persian Empire to the Mediterranean. But the official opening of the Silk Road marked a turning point. It started a great time for trade and sharing cultures between the East and the West. The Silk Road was a complicated and ever-changing web of routes. The land routes, also known as the Overland Silk Road, were the heart of the system. It was a massive caravan route winding through Central Asia and the Middle East, linking China's busy cities to the Mediterranean Sea. The Maritime Silk Road linked China to Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, and eventually even Europe. Ships laden with exotic cargo crisscrossed the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea, creating a truly global trading network. Silk was the most sought-after and highly prized commodity along the Silk Road. This exquisite fabric, named after the route itself, was a major export from China. Its beauty, durability, and shimmering luster made it a symbol of luxury, even used as a form of currency. But silk wasn't the only thing sold. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, prized for their flavor and medicinal properties, flowed eastward. Glassware, particularly from Samarkand, was renowned for its quality and artistry. Precious metals like gold, silver, and copper were highly sought after, with the Chinese particularly interested in acquiring them. But the Silk Road wasn't just about selling spices and buying silk, although that was a big part of it. It was a conduit for ideas. The Silk Road was a cultural explosion, a large network that carried the most precious cargo of all, ideas. It was a bridge allowing civilizations to exchange not just goods, but philosophies, religions, and artistic expressions in a way never seen before. Take Buddhism, for example. This Indian religion found fertile ground on the Silk Road, with merchants and dedicated missionaries. Buddhist temples appeared along the route like oases in the desert, their messages of enlightenment and the quest for nirvana resonating deeply with people across the region. The Silk Road wasn't a one-way street, though. Christianity and Islam, which started in the Middle East, also spread eastward along these trade routes. They created a mix of religious beliefs that still influence Eurasia today. It was also a forum where the brightest minds of the era came together. Philosophers from India and Greece, separated by long distance, exchanged ideas about the self, the soul, and the nature of reality. These intellectual exchanges deeply influenced Chinese thought, leading to the development of new philosophical schools. It even saw Buddhist and Taoist concepts merging on the Silk Road, creating entirely new ways of understanding the universe. This shared thirst for knowledge extended beyond philosophy as the Silk Road brought about scientific breakthroughs too. Gunpowder, a Chinese invention that revolutionized warfare, found its way westward along these routes, forever altering the course of military history. But it wasn't just about bombs. Knowledge of astronomy, with its ability to predict seasons and navigate by the stars, flowed freely. Mathematical concepts and medical practices were exchanged, which helped spread a global exchange of scientific thinking that laid the groundwork for future discoveries. Art wasn't just left behind in this grand exchange. The Silk Road turned into a place where different arts were mixed in a lively way. Indian and Greek styles traveled to China, influencing everything from painting to sculpture. Chinese art, in turn, left its mark on Central Asia and the Middle East. There was Gandharan art, a unique blend of Greek and Indian traditions, where Buddhist figures are depicted in a style reminiscent of Roman statues. Or Chinese Buddhist art, where the serene Buddha sits amidst landscapes filled with pagodas and traditional Chinese motifs. These are just a few examples of the amazing way art was shared along the Silk Road. But who carried these ideas? Who were the cultural ambassadors on this intellectual Silk Road? Missionaries spread their faith, translating sacred texts and establishing communities along the route. Scholars like Xuanzang, a famous Chinese monk, embarked on epic journeys, translating Buddhist texts and spreading Buddhist knowledge across Asia. Artists like Shang Sui, inspired by the cultural melting pot around them, created works that reflected the blend of styles and ideas they encountered. These dedicated individuals were the lifeblood of the Silk Road's intellectual exchange, the ones who ensured that ideas flowed as freely as goods. During the Han Dynasty in China, there was a great time helped by the Silk Road. Their exquisite silk fabrics became a status symbol in the West, a coveted treasure that generated massive wealth. The emperor's coffers were overflowing, grand projects were financed properly, and it strengthened China's military might. But the Roman Empire, with its insatiable appetite for Chinese silk, nearly drained their gold reserves trying to keep up. So they got into a trade-off which created a win-win situation for both empires. Basically, Roman gold for Chinese silk. Well, not only empires got richer, it also gave birth to busy cities that were full of energy. Just like Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, a busy metropolis in China, and Samarkand, a jewel of Central Asia. They both became centers of trade. Also, Constantinople, now Istanbul, appeared as a powerful gateway between East and West. All these cities became melting pots of culture, attracting artisans and scholars full of knowledge. To accommodate the constant flow of caravans, a bunch of places called caravanserais popped up all over Central Asia. These roadside inns weren't just resting places for weary travelers. They were social hubs where stories were exchanged, deals were struck, and cultural exchange flourished. With increased trade came the rise of a powerful new class, the merchants. These individuals, once seen as outsiders, gathered wealth and influence, challenging the traditional social order dominated by nobility and peasantry. They were like the self-made men of their time. Individuals with a keen eye for opportunity who built fortunes through trade. They forged alliances with rulers, gaining a seat at the power table and redefining the social landscape. Interestingly, women also played a crucial role in this trade revolution, particularly in the textile industry. They weren't just confined to the home. They were producers, traders, and key contributors to the Silk Road's success. Women ran businesses, negotiated deals, and drove economic change, a revolutionary idea for that time. Still on revolutionary ideas, papermaking, a revolutionary Chinese innovation, spread west, forever changing the way information was recorded and shared. Imagine a world without paper. History would be a collection of oral traditions and knowledge lost through generations. Gunpowder, another Chinese innovation with the potential to revolutionize warfare, traveled this route, altering military strategies far beyond China's borders. The compass, a great tool for navigation, and the printing press, which spread knowledge, also traveled along the Silk Road. They changed navigation, exploration, and the sharing of information. These new technologies started a wave of progress in the societies connected by the Silk Road. Warfare became more complex with gunpowder, demanding new tactics and strategies. Navigation became more precise with the compass, opening up new trade routes and leading to a surge in exploration. Communication boomed with the introduction of paper and the printing press, allowing information to travel faster and further than ever before. Trade also flourished with increased efficiency, as merchants could track their goods and communicate with greater ease. The Silk Road is often seen as a magical route full of rare goods and cultural exchange. But history, like a tapestry, has both bright and dark parts, and that was the case of the Silk Road. These trade routes, although they allowed for great exchange, also became fast roads for diseases. One of the most notorious diseases to travel the Silk Road was the bubonic plague. caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. It is believed to have arrived in Constantinople by way of the Silk Road, which decimated the Byzantine Empire. By the 14th century, Europe was ground zero for this horrific illness, with estimates suggesting 30 to 60% of the population perished. The plague's deadliness wasn't just about the bacteria itself. Overcrowded cities along the Silk Road, filled with people and animals in close quarters, and poor sanitation practices, created a perfect breeding ground for its rapid spread. The impact of the plague went far beyond mere casualties. Entire societies were left shocked. Trade routes that were once busy with activities became strangely quiet. Cities emptied as people fled the disease or succumbed to it. Economies crumbled as businesses shut down and the flow of goods stagnated. This wasn't just a health crisis, it was a social and economic earthquake. Art, literature, and even social structures changed as communities struggled with the devastation. The merchant class rose to prominence, filling the void left by the decline of traditional social hierarchies. The plague showed how connected the world was along the Silk Road, a connection that could be a force for good, but also a conduit for tragedy. And the tragedy didn't end there. Empires like the Romans and Persians locked horns over control of these lucrative routes for centuries. Battles between the likes of Carrhae and Edessa left a trail of destruction that disrupted trade and slowed down the flow of goods and ideas. Fast forward 1,000 years, and you see the Ottomans and Safavids battling for dominance. These conflicts weren't just small battles. They were full-blown wars with devastating consequences, not only spilling blood, but also stopping the very exchange that made the Silk Road so lively. Nomadic groups like the Xiongnu and Turkic tribes were a constant presence along the Silk Road. They controlled key trade routes and weren't afraid to clash with empires seeking to expand. They were also like the gatekeepers of the Silk Road, sometimes facilitating trade by providing safe passage for caravans, and other times disrupting it with raids. The Mongols, under the legendary Genghis Khan, were a different story altogether. They conquered large areas of territory, disrupting trade initially, but eventually they brought in a period of relative peace known as the Pax Mongolica. This period, though short-lived, allowed for a comeback of trade along the Silk Road, showcasing the complex relationship between conflict and cooperation that played out along this historic route. The greatest value of the Silk Road was the exchange of culture. Art, religion, philosophy, technology, language, science, architecture, and every other element of civilization were exchanged along these routes, carried with the commercial goods merchants traded from country to country. However, along this network, disease did travel as evidenced by the spread of the bubonic plague. Despite the dangers, the most significant turning point came with the growing European demand for Eastern goods. Europeans had become used to the goods from the East, and this led to the closing of the Silk Road, which forced merchants to find new trade routes to meet the demand for these goods. The merchants started sailing to trade, which started the Age of Discovery. This led to worldwide interactions and the beginnings of a global community. In its time, the Silk Road served to broaden people's understanding of the world they lived in. Its closure would push Europeans across the ocean to explore and eventually conquer the so-called New World of the Americas, initiating the so-called Columbian Exchange by which goods and values were passed between those of the Old World and those of the New, universally to the detriment of the indigenous people of the New World. In this way, the Silk Road can be said to have established the groundwork for the development of the modern world. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of the Silk Road. If you found this exploration fascinating, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Until next time, keep discovering the mysteries of our ancient past.